How's it going, guys? I hope you're all doing well out there today, wherever you are in the world. And in this video, we're going to look at how to integrate the Boss GT1000CORE into your existing setup, how to use it with your traditional valve amp, if you're going to use it as part of a pedal board, whether you're going to use it as a standalone effects processor, or even like I was doing in the intro there, where I was running 4-cable method and controlling channel switching and all kinds of stuff. We're going to go into it all today. As far as I know, all of this stuff applies directly to the bigger brother GT1000 as well, so don't worry if you've got that, this should all apply. I recently did a video covering all of the overlooked features of the GT1000 series. If you haven't seen that already, I strongly suggest you watch that first, because everything covered in that video applies directly to this one. All the cool tips and tricks can be used with your traditional guitar rig as well. So if you haven't seen that, I'll leave a link in the description below and you can check that out first. Now, depending on what you're trying to achieve, there's a number of ways of integrating this into your rig. If you want to use it as a standalone effects processor into the front of an amp, run it like any other pedal. Just run an output from your guitar into the input of the GT1000CORE and then out into your valve amp. Turn off all the amp models and just use it as an effects processor. You can also integrate it in the same way as any other pedal into an existing pedal board. You can, because the GT1000 has effects loops built in, use the GT1000 as sort of a brain of your pedal board. Loop things in and out and switch it all from the unit. You can go as far as I was doing in the intro there, where I'm running something called 4-cable method, and that lets me run effects both before the preamp and in the effects loop just using the GT1000CORE. To hook this up, come out of your guitar into the input of the GT1000, out of one of the sends into the input of your amp, in this case an EVH lunchbox head. Out of the send of your amp, you come into the return of the effects loop on the GT, and then the output goes to the return. Then you hook it up to a speaker cabinet, or if you're using a combo, your speaker's already there, and then you can utilize it by adding the effects loop into any part of the chain. Anything before that effects loop block will be pre-amp, and anything after will be post. What's prompted this video is I'm actually in the process of designing a new pedal board that will feature the GT1000CORE as sort of the main hub. I want the pedal board to be able to run 4-cable method just into the front of an amp, or running direct with the GT handling the amp modeling. A lot of this stuff that I'm going to talk about was queries that I had in my head before I started planning this out and testing. So hopefully it'll be useful to you, and hopefully there'll be a pedal board build video at some point in the near future. Integrating the GT into a traditional rig lets you replace most of your pedal board if you wanted to, but it can take it so much further. Again, if you refer to that other video, that you can add things like dynamic control. You can control parameters using just your pick attack. It opens you up to using the Boss models that have the multi-dimensional processing. So it sort of listens and analyzes what you're doing and changes settings in real time, which is crazy. There's a whole article about this on Boss's website, which I'll link below. They explain it way better than I can. But it just adds a whole nother level to your playing. You can also expression control everything. Like I said, anything that applied to that overlooked features video, you can apply to using it with a traditional rig, and it just opens up so many possibilities. If you opt to use 4-cable method, you can actually also utilize the preamps inside the GT. So what I was doing in the intro there, this little EVH head doesn't have a clean channel. The clean channel you heard was coming all from the GT running into the power amp of the EVH head. I'll show you how to set that up in a minute, but all you do is have 2 paths as you would 2 amps in the GT, and then you can switch between the preamp of your amplifier and the internal preamp of the GT. One thing that's always a consideration of mine when integrating something like this into a guitar rig is it going to suck tone? Is it going to take away from the experience of playing your guitar into your amp? The short answer is no, but why would you take random man on the internet's word for it? What I've done is set up a switcher so you can actually hear the difference between the GT1000 being in the path and being out of the path. I think the thing that a lot of people get wrong with units like this is they don't take the time to set the levels correctly, to match the levels between the unit being in the chain and out of the chain, and that's often perceived as tonal coloration or tone suck. And it's very important that the initial setup with your amp is done correctly. No amp is the same. The effects loops vary wildly, so you have to take a little bit of time to get it dialed in. So I'm going to demonstrate now the difference between having it in the signal path and out, and then I'll show you how to set the levels correctly. So we're plugged into the EVH in 4 cable method. If you look down here on the switcher, if I engage this, that's the GT active, both the front end and the back end. When this is off, everything's bypassed and I'm running purely the amplifier. I've got the levels set correctly, and I'm just running a blank preset in the GT with nothing other than the effects loop block. So this is without and then with. I've now got the volume backed off on my guitar so you can hear that it's not stealing any dynamics. To hear that tonal comparison with a different amp and slightly cleaner sound, I'm plugged into the Marshall Origin. I've gone through and made sure all the levels are set correctly again, and the same thing applies. No light, no GT, light on both the front end and back end of the GT1000 that are in the signal path. So to correctly match the levels of the GT to your existing rig, whether you're running 4 cable or just in and out, the GT gives you a number of level controls, and you need to compare it to when it's in and out of the circuit. Obviously something like this switcher is perfect for doing that because I can instantly compare, but you can just do it with a couple of cables, pulling them in and out. So first of all, you have your input level. So you go to the menu, in and out settings, and input level. And they give you this handy little graph here, and I like it just about hitting the triangle. So you set that first of all. If you're just running in and out of the GT1000, that is your output level. So using the input and output, you want to get it sounding as close to when it's not in the signal path as possible. If you're running 4 cable method, you're also utilizing an effects loop in the GT. If you go to the effects block and find the loop, they give you both a send and return control. The send will determine how much is hitting the front end of the amp, and the return will determine how much of your effects loop send is coming back into the GT. These can be really important if you've got a particularly hot effects loop. You can pad that down, but the GT is capable of handling pretty hot signals, so I haven't had a problem with any amps so far. So while we've got the cleaner platform of the Marshall, I want to show off one of my favorite drive models in the GT, and that is the XOD. It uses that multi-dimensional processing I was talking about, where it listens to your playing and varies various parameters to get like the most dynamics out of it. It's sort of like having your own little sound man in the pedal, which is pretty cool. So this is the Marshall Clean with a bit of verb from the GT in the effects loop. And then the XOD. There's other MDP engines in there. I think there's a distortion and a compressor, and there might be more, but that's the only ones I'm remembering at the moment. I want to show you exactly what's going on with my 4 cable preset for the EVH, because it utilizes effects both before and after, as well as channel switching and the internal preamp of the GT. It might give you an idea for some creative uses of this if you want to integrate it into a rig like this, and hopefully you'll see that just running the GT with an amp has almost limitless possibilities, disregarding any other pedals. So looking at the effects menu of this preset, you'll see I have a split path that you'll find on any preset of the GT. except instead of having the two internal preamps, one on each path, on one path I've got the internal preamp from the GT, and on the other the preamp of my EVH head. That in turn runs out into the power amp and gets amplified into your speaker. So how it's set up is when this green light is on, we're going into the bottom path. So I've got a compressor, a natural preamp, and a delay. So that clean sound sounds like this. And what's nice is where that's a split, as I change to the distorted sound, the delay will ring out from the clean. There's also a reverb over everything, but I've set the control center up to vary the amount of reverb between distorted and clean sounds. Again, if you want that information, check out my previous video. When I disengage this green light, it takes me to this upper path, which is the preamp of the EVH and a noise gate. And that sounds like this. And a little touch of reverb coming from the GT in the effects loop. When this goes red, as you'll see, it's changing the channel on the EVH head. When it goes red, it also engages an EQ for a little mid bump. So that EQ is running in the effects loop of the EVH, a little mid bump, and it also engages further down the path the delay. So between blue and red, the delay gets engaged. So the red channel with all the gubbins sounds like this. And then back to blue with takes off the effects and the EQ. So it really simplifies button presses, no more tap dancing or anything like that. Especially handy for, like, I've got a few friends that play in metal bands, and their thing is they always have a tube screamer and a noise gate on their distorted sound, but when they go to a clean sound, they don't want any of that. They possibly want some time-based effects. That would be so easy to set up in the GT. And also, if you're using a high gain amp that doesn't have a clean channel, you can set it up exactly like I've got it here. One extra thing I set up on this preset just to test the capabilities, but also show off things that aren't really possible with a traditional pedal board, is I've added a univibe block, but the speed is actually controlled by my picking dynamics. So the harder I play, the faster the univibe effect gets. If you want a full step-by-step, that's covered in my previous video, but just to show you here briefly, if you go into control assign and assign settings, you'll see here that my univibe rate, that's the minimum and the maximum, and then I'm controlling it from my input source, which is my guitar, my picking dynamics. And so that sounds like this. The dynamic control has to be one of my favorite features of the GT, and it's what really sets it apart for me, and it opens up so many creative possibilities. You can assign it to any parameter you can find in the GT, and just to prove that, I've taken it a little bit too far and I'm actually using it to dynamically control my amp channels. So as I pick harder, the channel on the amp changes. I really don't recommend you do this because I don't think amp relays can take being switched that aggressively. But just as an example, here we go. Another feature that makes the GT such a perfect candidate for 4-cable method is they include ground lifts. Often when you run one unit into the front and back end of an amp, you'll get a ground loop, a ground hum, a really irritating buzz over everything. The GT has the ability to lift grounds on various ins and outs. So you go to the menu, hardware settings and ground lift, and then it has different types, so which grounds are connected. I'm not going to scroll through them now because it creates a buzz, because at the moment my amp likes seeing all those grounds. But a different amp or a different room, the results may vary. If you get a buzz setting this up for yourself, simply scroll through the types of lifting and hopefully one of those will eliminate that buzz. So I think that about covers it for today. Thanks for hanging out, and I hope this video was helpful. I hope it's sort of got the creative juices flowing of how useful a unit like this can be when it's integrated even into a traditional rig, disregarding the amp modeling entirely. And I mean, the amp modeling is great in it. If you like this video or any of the other stuff I'm putting out, please like, comment and subscribe. It really does help me out pushing the channel forward and lets me keep making content like this. Whatever you're doing with the rest of your day, have a good one, and I'll see you in another video soon. Cheers, guys.